Good morning, Stewart's Chapel. Thumper Pigg here with Don Counts. I am glad to be able to do a few devotions with you all. Today is December 2nd. I don't think I mentioned that the last time that it was the 1st, but today is the 2nd nonetheless. And we are looking at the letter that Paul wrote to the Philippians. The occasion here is that Paul is in prison. They call this one of the prison epistles, meaning that it's one of the letters that he wrote while in bondage, in chains. And the Philippian church was largely responsible for helping to fund his missionary journeys. And so it's a very positive letter. So today we're going to be kind of focusing in on verses 19 to 21. I would invite you to go ahead and read all the way through Philippians. I'm just going to give you a few verses. I'm not trying to preach you a message. I'm just trying to encourage you and challenge you with a few things. So we're going to look at verses 19 to 21. It says, "For I know that this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayers and the provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, according to my earnest expectation and hope that I will not be put to shame in anything, but that with all boldness Christ will, even now as always, be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death." Again, this is known as a prison epistle. Paul was in prison. It's not like what we know here in America today, a modern prison. I have a nephew that spent some time in the prison, and I got to see him a time or two. These guys, I mean, no offense if you've found yourself. I realize that you lose your freedoms and things like that, and that's a serious thing. But my goodness, the privileges that I noticed that he had. My nephew could call me pretty well anytime he wanted to, it seemed like. They had food available. They had commissary, so that if a loved one would put some money on your card, then you could get some extra food or clothing or whatever you might need. They had a barber shop, all of that sort of thing. But Paul is in a Roman prison, okay? So you gotta take off these lenses and put on the first century Greco-Roman world lenses and think about where he is. Very possible that he was in the lowest depths of a prison where sewage and all kinds of things would go through. Very unsanitary conditions, very unsettling conditions. We would call it a humanitarian crisis here in America today. But what he's saying here at the beginning of this passage in verse 12 is he's saying, you know what? I'm in prison, and I can't say that this is a whole lot of fun. However, it has turned out for the greater good. I mean, even the people that are believers because of my imprisonment, man, they're proclaiming Christ even more boldly than they ever were before. I mean, my imprisonment in Christ has been known out throughout the whole Praetorian Guard here, and so it has turned out to be for the good. So where Paul is dirty and unhealthy, and we often think about things whenever we're looking in the will of God, or looking to see where we need to be, or what we think God is doing. We often look for smooth sailing, but that's not always the case. If you look in Acts chapter 16, I'm pretty confident of that. Acts chapter 16, you'll see a story where Paul was trying to go up into different areas, and he was prevented by the Spirit of God. He was prevented by the Spirit of Christ, and so he found himself in an area, and he runs into a lady named Lydia, and basically comes up on a women's Bible study. And then next thing you know, all these people are becoming believers. So we don't always get to look for the smooth sailing. Again, Paul is in a prison, but he's saying it's a good thing that he is there. And he's confident that he will come out of this particular prison at some given point. So it's not always smooth sailing. We would likely see imprisonment as a setback in Paul's world, but he felt like it was absolutely not. In fact, he believed that he was in the very center of the will of God, being exactly where he was. So this is a little unique, a little different situation. You and I oftentimes are not going to find ourselves in a prison for the cause of the gospel. That's why he was put in prison in the first place, because he kept proclaiming Christ, and he would not stop. Tradition holds that all of the believers except for John were martyred because of, all the disciples were martyred because of their faith. But Paul recognizes this as an opportunity. He has learned to be content in all situations. We'll look more about that as we get to chapter 4. And he sees his body as a vessel to serve the Lord. So again, he's saying, I know that this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayers and provision of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, according to my earnest expectation and hope, that I will not be put to shame at anything, but that with all boldness Christ will even now, as always, be exalted in my body, whether by death or by life. So we have this man who is in prison. He is exalting Christ no matter what circumstance he finds himself in. He sees it as an opportunity. Perhaps you're in a job that you don't particularly like. Maybe the boss is not the greatest to work with. Maybe the working conditions aren't the greatest. But perhaps you might see this a little bit differently. Maybe the family that you're a part of is not... well, maybe your family's full of drama, okay? Perhaps we need to flip our mindset to think about these things rather than being a nuisance or, oh, woe is me, but think of these things as an opportunity. Look for those opportunities. So my challenge for you today is, do you have the resolve to proclaim Christ no matter the circumstances? Don't just seek the right moment. Seek boldness. Don't just seek the right moment, because we always look for that opportunity, for that little way in. Don't just look for those things. Ask God for boldness and then strike whenever the Spirit leads. Thank you very much. I hope you all have a blessed one.